Today we're delighted to have Dr. Teck Khong with us. Teck is the leader of the Alliance for Freedom and Democracy, and today he's going to talk to us about what his party stands for and about a number of the hot topics of the day. So I'd like to welcome Teck Khong to the latest in our CIBUK and Facts4EU interviews with important political figures from around the world. So Teck, over to you. Why don't you introduce yourself to the audience?
I'm a GP who recently retired. I was born in colonial Malaya, came here to study medicine at Sheffield University, and progressing through professional development. I was a GP from 1982 to 2018. And during which time I was also a forensic physician. I was the police surgeon for Leicestershire Constabulary from 1984 to 2005, when I stood down to stand in a general election, and then picked up again from 2005 to 2012. When I was a GP, I served a very poor population. The ward on which the surgery premises were based is in one of the bottom 10% of wards in the country. And it was a great privilege to look after the poor people. I understood their anxieties. I delivered my care to them assiduously. And in return, I think I'm humbled to say they were grateful for my care and diligence. But in that time, I realized there were a few things not quite right. And as we approached the 90s, the NHS was in a very turbulent time. We spent an awful lot of money. So when the Labour government came to power, the annual spend was £37 billion. When they left it, it was well over £120 billion. And productivity didn't really rise. And what even happened, worst of all, was waiting lists increasingly became worse and worse. And then if you fast forwarded it today, we have problems with degradation of the service, inaccessibility to primary care services by vast swathes of the population. So we are doing a huge disservice for the huge amount of investment of taxpayers' money into a health system. My entry into politics came rather late, and thanks to a lady who was the chairman of Leicestershire County Council. She eventually introduced me to the chair of the Select Committee on Health, who was at the time Oliver Heald. I said to him that the health service must change, can be changed, and we have to be bold. And one thing led to another, and I was invited to become a candidate of the Conservative Party. Unfortunately, as far as my association with the party was concerned, my Brexit views fell out with the party mainstream of the party, and I found myself quite isolated. So I left and went across to UKIP, and then later on with UKIP disintegrating, I was going to quit politics altogether until a group of people started up the Alliance for Democracy and Freedom.
Can you explain to us what the Alliance for Democracy and Freedom party is all about? What are your aims, objectives, policies?
After the last two general elections, various people who are veterans in politics, really, people like Mike Hookham and so on, they got together and said, look, we can't really go forward serving the country if politics isn't right. So they came up with an idea of having an alliance of independents, of new parties, where they can look to serve the people without the distraction of polarizing left or right. So we coined the term center sensible. We do whatever is right, and we will refuse to be categorized whether it's left or right. For example, if we say we need to control immigration and manage it properly, that doesn't mean we are left wing or right wing. It means we are cognizant of the difficulties of the stresses on infrastructure. We need to take care of our people first, and so on. And also to respect the dignity of those people who need to have a place of sanctuary in the United Kingdom. The ethos of the party is to encourage grassroots empowerment. So we have proud of groups based on townships and villages. We have proud of groups based on occupation. I nominally run the group proud of British healthcare professionals. So this is how we engage with the people at various levels of politics, at various levels of society, to make sure that people are re-engaged in deciding the future of their community, of their profession, and ultimately of our country.
What position does the Alliance take on some of the main issues, like, for example, immigration?
If the people arriving on our shores are really escaping persecution, then they should apply by the normal process so that they can be admitted to the country. But you know, one of the basic tenets of asylum seeking is when fleeing an area of conflict, you reach a country of safety, that should be where you start your application process. But a lot of these people are not true asylum seekers in the sense of the word, fleeing war, fleeing persecution, but they're economic migrants. We are putting them in accommodation at great expense to the taxpayers. We don't know the backgrounds. Do they pose any security threat? Are they a liability for, you know, the health system, the educational system, and so on? We want to minimize the friction between incomers and the established population. And we want to ensure that this country can go forward safe and prosperous.
If the European Court of Human Rights were to interfere again in the UK's sovereign decisions, would you resile from the ECHR in part?
If the level of interference is such that we cannot exercise our autonomy and the reasons for their interference is spurious, I would most certainly leave the ECHR.
What about net zero and the whole climate change debate? What are the party's views on that?
Well, we share the anxiety and even anger of the British public. The vast majority of the public would understand that climate isn't driven by carbon emissions from human activity. For example, we know that climatic changes happens in cycles. We have the El Niño phenomena. We have recurrent ice ages. None of the evidence presented to us has shown conclusive evidence that carbon dioxide and industrial activity has contributed to climate change. It may have contributed to pollution, but it certainly doesn't change our climate.
So it would be fair to say that you tend towards the skeptical line on climate change orthodoxy.
I think if you look at the policies around attaining net zero, it is very punitive. It cripples certain industries. It changes the way society has worked. And this transition not only is a vast change, it is also catastrophic in its effects. I just want to look at the rationale for change. I cannot justify. For example, when people talk about electric vehicles, the downsides of using electric vehicles hasn't been mentioned. You know, it looks as if it's very simple and clean by just plugging into your car. But if you look at the scarification of the earth for minerals, the sort of energy that needs to drive to produce the electricity in the first instance, they carry a high cost.
There's a few geopolitical things that we might talk about possibly. what are your party's views on Brexit, on Russia, and on China?
Taking Brexit first, it's a real shame we missed an opportunity. We haven't achieved Brexit. We're a single nation. The United Kingdom is Great Britain, Northern Ireland, Scotland, and Wales. Yet we are now treated as if Northern Ireland isn't part of the country. That isn't right. At the EU, there was one flag flown. There wasn't an English flag, a Welsh flag, a Scottish flag, or Northern Irish flag. But why, after Brexit, do we have a border down the Irish Sea?
So in terms of the Windsor framework, for example, presumably your party is against.
Absolutely right.
Let's turn to a little bit further afield, and Ukraine and Russia. Let's take that next. What's your view on Russia?
I'll speak about the Ukrainian war. It's a war that has nothing to do with Britain, nothing to do with the United Kingdom. I would expect a withdrawal from the Ukraine-Russian war. We have no direct quarrels with Russia. Ukraine isn't a territory of the United Kingdom.
You would not be in favor of the continuation of us sending armaments to Ukraine, for example?
Not at all. It pulls us right into the theatre of war with Russia.
What is your party's view about China? Does it represent a threat, or how do you feel about it?
China is trying to establish itself as the dominant economic power in the world. But, you know, along with economic ascendancy comes, well, the undercurrent of it is military and territorial superiority. I think there are a lot of issues we need to be very careful about.
The smaller parties, such as the Alliance for Democracy and Freedom, do not get a great deal of airtime on our national media. So here is your opportunity, Teck. You can talk direct to our audience, tell them your final message and why they should vote for you next week.
It's been the primary mission of the Alliance for Democracy and Freedom to be the third force in British politics. The reason we want to achieve that is we know that a lot of people out there are sick and tired of the shenanigans in Parliament between Labour and Conservative, while the people are losing out. None of us in the ADF party have any egos, no illusion about name change, moving forward as a different entity. But we really need, if you're sincere about serving the people, we need to start somewhere. And as far as the local elections are concerned, I think, yes, first and foremost, our council candidates would look to serve the people on local issues, and they are actually free from being whipped, because we want our candidates who become councillors to respond directly to the issues the residents present them.
How many candidates do you have?
We have 17 active candidates. We have candidates all over the country, but unfortunately not in the force, not in the numbers that we like to try and take over a council.
Teck, you were a general practitioner, you're a doctor. Perhaps you could tell us what your thoughts on the whole COVID-19 scenario, lockdowns and vaccines.
First and foremost, when the pandemic was announced back in March 2020, a lot of people were frightened by the horrors of what it can do to the population. There was scary scenes and reports of high death rates, and the number of cases kept soaring. So we were frightened. So there was a climate of fear pervading the whole society. And as a GP, I saw how seriously it impacted on people's emotions and so on. But just as we were getting locked down and so on, I started noticing anomalies and inconsistencies in the policies. And I was surprised that there were no issues, no questions asked about informed consent. When you have an experimental product like COVID vaccine that it is, in phase 3 clinical trial, when we give it to patients or intend to give it to patients, we always give them informed consent. That means you tell them what's all about, the risk profile, the benefits, the possible benefits, and it's a trial. It's for them to decide, but we actually put it through on a massive rollout that everybody virtually is coerced into having it. We have individual informed consent being overlooked. We have technology not being addressed, technological problems not being addressed properly. My party asked for a moratorium back in November of 2020, when I first alerted the public to the side effects that I've been coming across. There is a lack of pharmacovigilance. If we were censored from discussing it, we can't progress.
Are there any other subjects that you would like to talk to us about?
One of the things that my party is very keen on, and I think the public is very desperate to expose and move away from, is the World Economic Forum. I think it's exerting an undue pressure and force on the way we run our country. And going forward, I think we need to be very careful to maintain our autonomy on health matters. The Pandemic Preparedness Treaty that's looming, and the International Health Regulation Amendments, we have to be very careful about allowing our sovereignty, our right to legislate, to be taken away, because under the guise of uniformity in countering pandemic, we could unwittingly lose the freedom to legislate and protect our people. There's no need to have a treaty to exercise control over any pandemic, because cooperation doesn't really require a treaty. All we do is exchange good ideas, good practices, and contain whatever needs containment.
I'd like to thank you on behalf of our audience for your time today. I think they'll find your comments very interesting, and good luck in the elections next week.
Thank you very much, Lee. Thank you all.